Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Arts and Ideas. I'm Sue Swinand. And today my guest is artist and educator John Hayes-Nikas. And he recently had a fabulous show over at the Aurora Gallery at Arts Worcester called The Return. And I was just in love with that show. He has the most elegant structures and beautiful line and gorgeous subtle material use, and so I'm a big fan of his work, and I'm happy to be able to share it with you today. And John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Really happy to have you here.
Yeah, me too.
I was curious, why was that show called The Return?
Well, The Return, I was a working artist in the city of Boston in a number of venues. And I got married, fell in love, got married in 1984, had children. And I was still trying to do the art game, and it was getting more difficult and more difficult.
It's a tough row.
Yeah, and our circle of comrades, we were losing them to that vicious AIDS virus. Started to have children, and I made a deal with my wife, Brenda. I want to be a good teacher, a good father, and a good husband. So I was going to take my art world, put it on the shelf. But when the boys got old enough and I could get back into it, then I would return to the game. So that's sort of...
So that was basically your story, your life story was the return,
yes,
coming back to the art world.
Yep.
And I first saw your work over at Arts Worcester, and I noticed it right away and was very aware of it ever since. And how long have you been a member there? When did this happen?
That happened in 2014. I went to see, I taught at Westboro High School for 31 years, but I taught for 10 years prior to that in the city of Boston and down on the South Shore. So one of my ex-students had a solo show there, so I went there to see her work.
At Arts Worcester?
At Arts Worcester, yes, thank you. And she introduced me to Juliet. I had just befriended Steve Dorado and a couple of people at Clark. And
so all of a sudden you were plugged in. All of a sudden you're plugged in.
Fabulous.
That's the great thing about Arts Worcester, is it's a place where artists can come together and not be so isolated and feel like they're working in a vacuum. It gives you people an opportunity to
Arts Worcester does just that. Yeah.
It does indeed.
I was starving for communication and exchange, being in where I was, and this just opened up the world to other artists. Great.
So now you taught for 31 years at Westboro High School?
Yes.
Yeah. And I noticed you were given an award an Alumni Award from Mass College of Art, too. That was your alma mater?
Yes, I graduated in 1975, and in 2015, I was acknowledged, as well as a number of other people, to getting the coveted Alumni Award. Which was
awesome.
It was fabulous. Made me cry when I heard about it.
For his service in education in the state of Massachusetts, right?
Correct. Yeah. And also for the contributions that we made in the history of Massachusetts College of Art.
Oh ho. Mm-hmm. And what was your major there?
I was a painting major with a printmaking minor.
Mm-hmm. I can see printmaking would be a strong thing for you with your line and your use of it's kind of like lithography.
I would love lithography.
Yeah. So let's show a couple of the images, and we can start letting the audience see what you do.
This piece here is Ursprache, or Ursprache. It's German, means first voice, first language, and it was the first piece that I had in Arts Worcester. I had started the return around 2013. But it took me a good 2 years to produce work that I felt was good enough.
Felt like get up to steam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Get focused, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I use a vertical and horizontal theme. It's not symbolic of a crucifix, but it is a cruciform. Anytime you have a vertical and a horizontal interchange, some people sort of read too much into that. But it's really more about the play of space. And this was one of my first success once I got back onto the game, as it were.
Mm-hmm. You want to get to the next one?
Yeah.
Ooh,
This
yeah.
was a piece called Shrewsbury. It's Gaelic. It means Hill of the Witch. And this was in the Arts Worcester exhibit called The Grayscale. And it was very successful insofar as it was not only in that, it was also one of the pieces that were chosen to go to the Fitchburg Art Museum.
I like the way it has a little hair on its head.
It does. It does have a little hair on its
You
head.
know, when I look at these images, so many of them feel like portals and doorways, but those little graphite lines that are, you know, they could be hairs, they could be grasses
Grass.
growing on the,
Grass, yeah.
I really like it.
Um,
The difference.
yeah, and I have just a detail of it.
Close up, yeah.
Yeah.
I see the spattering inside, the way the black, is that just spattered tempera or?
This one here is enamel. I use 4 different methods to get my rich blacks. One is spray enamel, another one is tempera, poster paint.
Yeah.
The other one is an ink, a matte ink, and the other one is just other paint.
Yeah. The tricky part about enamel is it has a gloss to it often, which it doesn't make it velvety and deep, you know, so.
This is matte.
This looks very velvety and deep.
Yeah, and the spray, I have 4 different sprays. I use the old toothbrush method. I have
Toothbrush method.
I have an aerosol can spray. I have a little Badger airbrush, and also the old atomizer.
We were just talking about that, the little thing you blow out and
Yeah,
just
that's how we
don't
used
blow
to
in.
varnish our pictures.
Yeah, remember the fixative that was so poisonous and we were blowing that all around? Oh, this is a lovely one.
This is Orbis Tertius, and it means 3 worlds. And in this one, in the top section is 1 world, and in the bottom section is 2 different worlds. And a number of my titles come from something I'm reading, whether it's a short story. In this case, it was Luis Borges, the Argentinian poet and short story writer. I love his work. He's just magical.
So that's all kind of otherworldly, imaginary kind of, yeah. Well, I have to say this one to me has a very spiritual, religious, and I know you said they weren't explicitly that, but if people bring that with them, that's okay.
They
you know,
can.
Many different possibilities.
Yeah, in my artist statement for the Arts Worcester show, I said that my work is comes from a very magical place, meaning that I don't necessarily know where these images come from, and I don't when I start working. I'll start with a structure and just grow on that, get into that artistic groove or that artistic space, and just in 4 hours.
That's the way you have to be. You have to be in the unknown and just go forward. Yep, beautiful.
There's
these are so lovely, so lovely. That's the detail of the top, right?
Yes.
Gorgeous. It stands on its own, you know.
Well, thank you. Yeah, one of the things I like to do, and I can do it in my drawings, I can't necessarily do it in my paintings, is I'm looking at the bottom of Orbis Tertius right now, and it's a fine detail, and you can see the compressed little spaces where the verticals float in front of one another, they're tucked behind one another.
Yes.
And the bottom horizontal and verticals are really the white of the paper, but they become a whole different
That's where the
animal.
tape was applied,
Yes.
and yeah. Well, you see, to me, the elegance of it and the poetry is the way those hard, crisp, mechanical edges, which came from a mechanical, tape, which is cut with a machine, against those dragged, abrasive, gestural, smudged,
erased.
So there's that soft and hard, clean and dirty. You know, it's it's very nice.
This is Alsatian detail. And for the people who are watching the show right now, if you look at this, you can see how I apply those elements that you said, and it's very similar to the demonstration I have in the drawing.
Yes. But do you notice the 4 layers of space? Like there's that thin vertical in the far distance, then there's that smoky horizon, then there's that crisp space in front of that, then there's the scribble line, then there's the white crisp line, then there's the scribble line in front of that. And also notice where the pencil line scribbles very energetically with forcefully. Notice how that shines in front of the velvet of the charcoal behind it.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful way to let the one black stand in front of the other.
Yeah. And they're all in relationship to one another. I like the way you explain the compressed space.
Yes.
So
that's a nice close-up that shows the just exactly what we're saying. The shiny lines in front of how they stand in front of the soft black.
The graphite, powdered graphite, I can get a smooth gray with that, but then again, I rely on the shininess of the
just rubbing it with your finger.
8B or a 9B graphite. This is benediction, and this is the top section of it to show you how I push back with the blacks and allow the white of the paper to pop back out. So it plays at 3 or 4 different levels.
You know, we should show the audience how you actually work. You brought some materials with you today.
I did.
Let's take a look at those.
Okay.
Well, I'm excited to get to see how he uses the materials. So thanks for bringing your materials in. How do you get started?
Well, usually I have a springboard effect by looking through my sketchbook and seeing some of the designs that I've just plucked down from architecture, from things I've seen in nature, just to get started. I have no idea what the end result is going to be, but I have an idea of the structure. And for today's demonstration, I have 2 horizontals. I use a tape. I slice it down. I have a sense of what sizes that I want. And just for today, again, I have a vertical, have a horizontal. And the materials that I used in the return series is powdered graphite, a graphite lubricant that you get at a hardware store. I like my paper to be watercolor paper, 140 pounds, hot pressed.
Which means very smooth.
Very, very smooth. That's how I can get a very smooth transition.
And also how you get those geometric lines that are so precise, like a razor.
Yes, that's true. I do have a razor blade on in my drawing kit, and also a number of types of erasers. But what I would probably do in this case is I'm going to start just with a little tap here, because this goes a long way. And I do different types of layers as well. So I might move this in here just to get it into the grain of the paper. Maybe I'll react to it by going a little softer at the top and get a little fuzzy. And then I like to use my eraser on it to get those energized sort of marks.
So he's actually drawing with the eraser here.
Yes. So I have that. I love my 2/8. Just for starters, I have my 8B. I like a 9B as well.
You need a very soft pencil.
Yep. So sometimes I'll start off with my scribble actions and then remove a lot of it with other drawing actions on it.
And what actually happens with that is space is created by white lines going in front of dark lines and dark lines going in front of light lines. It's a strange spatial mass that you create with the line.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the blue tapes are acting as a stencil that's going to leave a very, very crisp white edge.
Absolutely.
In that fuzzy, smoky field.
Mm-hmm. So I might have something like this, and I just continue to work on that until the piece is finished, or when I get a sense that it's finished.
Now, are you using charcoal sticks also, or just the powdered graphite?
On this one here, I just used the powdered graphite, but if I wanted a rich, rich black,
right,
I might take a piece of charcoal and fuzz that up so you get a richer one. But when I want to get a pure, rich velvety black. I might use tempera paint,
Yes.
or this new ink I was introduced to, which is Doc Martens matte
Yes,
or
yes.
flat.
We
So
both
this
got introduced to that. You know, the beauty is, though, that he's very conscious of the velvety blackness of the charcoal or the silvery upfront line of the graphite, you know, that the pencil.
Yes.
The pencil, it's much more on the surface, whereas the velvety stuff kind of sinks back into space.
Once I did, and again, this is demonstrations, once I removed this, the white of the paper pops off, especially when it's surrounded by rich blacks.
And it advances.
It advances, that's the idea. I kind of play around with a cubist space.
Yes, because the fact is, the white line, and now this line makes a third layer of space.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the fuzzy black stuff and the white stuff, then the white line is over top of that, and then the scribble line is over top of that, so there are layers of space.
It's very compressed space.
Lovely,
yes.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Well, great. Thanks a lot for that.
All righty.
Let's look at a couple more here.
This is the complete third, where I have quite often, I didn't notice this until I started to hang the show with Tim Johnson at Arts Worcester, that the formal construct of these are either pointing up or they're pointing down. And
the other formal thing about them is that they're dead center.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, I wanted to ask you about that. Do you always use symmetrical structures?
Yeah.
Always symmetry?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's who I am.
Did you ever use an organic shape?
Yes, I've been known to do that, but that was many, many years ago. I've been working on this series of drawings in my head since 1978.
But they're so pure, you know, they're so mathematical, they're so stable, they're so elegantly, you know, they're just constructs of the mind in a way, you know. They're just lovely.
I forget. Yeah, there's another detail.
Now that one, because of the elongation of the vertical, really looks like a crucifix form.
Yes, I'll have to say that that's true in this, but on closer detail, you can see the different spaces and the compression there and the overlapping. So.
I really love the sharpness and softness. Can we take another one?
Sure.
Okay. How about this one?
Well, this was interesting because this is the only horizontal piece that was in the show. And I have a difficult time with diagonals, although my marks are adding the diagonal and energy to them. But for me to work on a horizontal surface for this series is quite...
You know, I always can't stop thinking about the basic architectural units of post and lintel, too.
Absolutely.
What brought you to this imagery, do you know?
I think the architecture when I was living in the city of Boston, and also, believe it or not, some of the pre-Christian burial mounds and structures I saw when I visited Ireland and France and England.
They definitely, we're jumping all over the place here, but this one, for example, definitely has that feeling of portal.
They're portals, they're egresses, they're a travel into space of sorts.
Yeah.
They could be windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like the kind of the enigmatic quality, and what I mean by that is you sort of travel into that doorway, into that unknown space, but there's no space there.
No.
So it's nowhere. So there's really no there.
Yeah,
you know
it's somewhere between the imagined and the solidness of it. It alludes to something while still being an illusion.
There's no sense of real space. It's an illusionary space, and as I say, it's not there.
Yeah, suggested.
You go there, but there's nothing there.
It's suggested.
Yeah. What?
You said you wanted to ask me something about teaching?
Yeah.
Or schools?
Well, did teaching play a big part in your like in the way you developed over the years? And I know you're still teaching at Clark, aren't you?
Yeah, but I taught in the public sector. Like I said, 31 years in Westboro, I think 8 in the South Shore, but I was teaching at colleges. Thanks to Barbara Anderson, I lost my teaching job to Prop 2.5 back in 1980. And that allowed me to go to secondary schools and colleges in the city of Boston.
And what are you teaching at Clark?
I teach I think it's an interesting class. It's the history of modern art.
Oh, wow, that would be great.
1865 to
Now, is this something you had to develop a whole course for, or were you doing that in your previous teaching experience?
At Westboro High School, we were given the task by the principal after an evaluation that we needed to have interdisciplinary courses. So I was handpicked with the music teacher and an English teacher, and we taught what we call the birth of modernism, that approached the music, the art, and the literature, plus some philosophies over the modern period.
Were you a student of philosophy as well? I notice your work seems to have some...
I wasn't a philosophy major, but I delved into it quite a bit.
I really like, we were talking a little bit before about the enigmatic quality of your works, and I think I was so struck by them, and they seem to represent for me some kind of truth, some kind of reality that I could experience through your work. But there's that whole thing of all the realities that we can't really measure or weigh, or and so there's all that abstract sort of non-physical reality, like the thought or the time or none of these.
The imagination,
they're all
possibility.
Made out of your mental constructs.
Or metaphysical.
But anyway, that they struck me in that way, and I was thinking of the Chinese quote that says, Tao that is true Tao does not use words, or the true Tao cannot be spoken in words, or something like that. But that's what I think art is able to do. It's able to bring you to some experience of some reality that is not something you saw around the corner. You know?
I mean...
So you're starting off by looking at architecture and the burial mounds and stuff like that, but basically you're developing some kind of a structure which experiences the stability and the drama and it's like gathering the energy around it into this one stable unit, it's...
Yeah, I mean, it isn't Zen, but you could study that for a while. One of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of the drawings is that I was influenced by Giacometti, Rico Lebrun, of course Jim Dine, and some of the other faculty.
Jim Dine, I could see how you would be from him.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think is wonderful about them is the whole symbolism of the passage into another place, for human experience, to be able to pass this kind of entry. Or
you asked if I ever used organic shapes before, and yes, I did. I went to art school and I painted the model and I did the still life and I did the landscape.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, outside in then you create it. So it's through the process of visual reiteration.
It comes from the outside and goes...
All of this stuff is just inside out creativity. Whatever that stuff is inside me. And you work abstractly, so...
And it's all intuitive for you then?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, what was it a return trip to Ireland that got you started on these kind of portal images, or?
No, actually, they started in '78 when one of my professors, Norman Toynton at Mass Art, just said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm painting the model. I'm painting the still life." He goes, do some abstract work, and I was frightened by it. And I said, I don't know how to. I don't have permission to do it, because I was the good art student that did
You
the
know what?
lessons.
It's sometimes good when you don't know how, because then you have to invent.
That's what he told me to do.
You learn somebody else's how to, and it's no good for you.
Do 100 drawings in 30 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Nice. My teacher used to say, fill a sketchbook a day. But that was looking at the world.
Oh.
That was looking at the world and learning how to use materials. What about some of these, well, you know, probably we should wrap it up. I wanted to ask you what your plans are and what you're looking at now. Are you
I'm finishing
working on
up
anything
the
else,
return. Even though I've had the exhibit, I still have some things inside of me that I have to get out. But
Okay.
I think I showed you earlier this afternoon, I'm working with some colorful pastel works that are pretty much the same structure. It's a rectangle with my horizontal blocks. And I'm working with my stroke, my energy stroke.
Yeah.
Or the lazy hand, but
Yeah.
it's interesting to work with
Well,
that.
so that's going to be a continuation of the return, or just a
No,
whole new?
the return is
Okay.
winding up.
And how about painting? You got anything going with that? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. And also, John has a show he's going to be in this weekend, is it not? Where you're, what's the show at Arts Worcester now? The
E Pluribus Unum?
E Pluribus Unum.
Hopefully I'll be in that. I didn't make the cut last year, but
You'll be in it at Arts Worcester.
hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
anyway, stop by Arts Worcester and follow John's work. I think you'll enjoy it. And I've really enjoyed looking at it with you, John, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks
and
for having
thank
me,
you
Susan.
also for joining us, and I hope to see you again next time for another edition of Arts and Ideas.